Hey guys, Jay here. So today we're unboxing something truly special, one of my favorite speakers of all time. So these are the speakers that I have been in absolute love since last year. In fact, last year I gave the speaker the Product of the Year award, which is the only award, a single award I give out to a singular speaker that I find personally to be exceptional. In fact, let me grab that award right now. Okay, so this is the award, as you can see. And it's the only award, again, I give out to a singular product every year. And this one was for Best Loudspeaker of 2023. So, bar none, best I have heard in 2023 in my room was kind of the gist of this award. And don't get me wrong, there were a lot of good contenders like the Rasa Fiorentino Sotaldo loudspeakers that I also absolutely loved. That speaker, again, was a little bit of a warmer sound with good detail retrieval, even though it was a warmer sound. And for anyone that wants that kind of sound, that is an exceptional speaker and was a very close contender to this loudspeaker. But for the fraction of the price, this loudspeaker did something that truly wowed me. In fact, if you see my original review of this loudspeaker, I'm kind of stuttering a little bit, and actually a lot. And a lot of you guys have commented like I'm speechless, and that's what it was. It somehow, for me, again, I'm not speaking for anyone else, I'm just speaking for myself. For me, it engaged me emotionally with the music, and that came from the sense of deep depth of sound, but with great kind of attack and decay structure of the strings, which, I love strings. I love string instruments. That's a lot of the stuff that I listen to on my personal enjoyment time. And this speaker never gets crowded. It's always very distinct in its separation, which I always appreciate. Very clean dynamics. And for me, I guess in my room, because I'm not in a huge room. Now, this speaker, they just came out with the VC2 module, which is the bass module that you saw at Expona coverage that I did. And that extends the bass and, it's for bigger rooms. But in my room, in my case, like this speaker absolutely does wonders in this room. The soundscape, the sound stage, right? I say scape because it's that large. The width and the depth, the layering between the sound, just the vocal, the sweetness, everything about the speaker speaks to me emotionally. So before going any further, I should probably preface this video by saying that this video is not sponsored by MonAcoustic whatsoever. I just genuinely love the Platimon loudspeakers. I love them enough to give them an award, and I love them enough to, use as my reference. Now, I did make a full review video that I'll link in the description for you guys. You can check that video out. But, if you want to learn more about the speakers. But this video is more for stuff that's outside the scope of a review. Things I wanted to tell, the background stories that I thought was really cool, but it would make the video too long, and it didn't, again, outside of the scope of the review video itself. Now, I first heard the Platimon speakers like last year, when I visited Korea for 2 weeks. And in that short amount of time, a lot of Korean audio brands learned that I was in Korea. And they obviously, for obvious reasons, marketing, right? They wanted me to cover their brand. And I was like, a little bit hesitant because, again, I was there for family reasons. I only had 2 weeks. Couldn't possibly cover every single one of the Korean brands that I wanted to. So I had to be very selective. Now, at this very same time, the US rep at the time for MonAcoustic, who is now the CEO, Young, was visiting Korea at the same time. So I was very lucky. So he invited me over to a dealership that had the Platimon loudspeakers. And that was my first time hearing the new Platimon loudspeakers at the time. And I thought this was a great opportunity, so I decided to go because since it's a dealer and it's one of the highest end dealers in Korea, and they're also Sanctus Audio cable manufacturer. So I thought, killing three birds with one stone. So I went there and I was truly floored by what I heard there. I mean, they had so many stuff that I could listen to, but what stood out to me was, again, the Platimons. They had many different variations of the Platimons at the time, and just hearing them, I was just floored by the nuance, the details, there are again different variations, and I was liking what I was hearing individually. Now they did settle and kind of marry all those kind of combinations together to find the best kind of balance. But in that process, I saw a very small portion of what the designer was doing. So the designer, June, that I met in Korea and also at Expona this year, he is a very dedicated designer, and I saw that firsthand. They were treating me to sushi because they're so nice, and I was eating sushi, having a blast because I love sushi. Everyone was drinking and having fun, and I think it must be like 3 or 4 hours of just party, right? And then June comes out of nowhere, right, from the room where the Platimons were, bloodshot eyes, okay? He looks like he's about to pass out, and he goes, "Oh, I think I did it, you guys gotta hear this." And I'm thinking to myself, so this guy has been working on crossover for the Platimons all this time that we were enjoying ourselves. And I thought, wow, that's some incredible kind of passion and work ethic. And every single time I see him, he's always tweaking, I saw him tweaking stuff in the bathroom at Expona, just, experimenting with stuff. So he's always like, his gears are always turning and always trying to improve his speakers, improve his, speaker designs, and to me, I love the fact that the Platimon loudspeakers that I'm using as my reference comes from a designer who is so very passionate about the sound that he creates with the speakers. Again, a little bit about June's background. From what I know, again, I don't know June, on a personal level by any means, but from what I heard, he used to be a mathematician, and he used to play a lot of music, and he was actually a musician from my understanding. He comes from a family of musicians, so he is very accustomed. I believe his sister is a pianist or something like that. So again, don't quote me, but he has very good understanding of music and how it's portrayed. So I think that was also a good important factor for me, because again, I would like my speaker designer to know the music very well. Aside from that, I heard other stories that I thought was just mesmerizingly interesting. So hearing the Platimon speakers and the variations for the first time, I was a little bit scared because, I'm not a fan of aluminum cabinets in general. Companies that usually have aluminum cabinets, to me, exhibit a certain kind of characteristic to the sound. And again, I'm not saying there's anything wrong with aluminum cabinets. It's a personal preference thing. And just like how a AMT tweeter will sound different from a soft dome tweeter and sound different from a metal dome tweeter, even though they're emitting the exact same frequency, based on material, things will sound different. And that's why you see so many different materials and so on with drivers and cabinets and so on. And so, MDF is kind of like my preference. Like MDF, wood is perfectly fine for me. But a lot of companies out there that use aluminum cabinetry say that it's more rigid, it doesn't flex like a wood would. And so there's different reasons to using aluminum. But I personally found that the reason that MonAcoustic uses aluminum to be quite interesting, and it matched to why I wasn't getting that aluminum sound out of the MonAcoustic Platimon speakers that I was hearing at the time. I was quite impressed actually. I was like, wow, this doesn't sound like a typical aluminum speaker that I know, like Magico or YG Acoustics and so on. So I kind of asked why they use aluminum, and the story that came back was super, super interesting to me. So first of all, June, as crazy as he is as a designer, used Umpingo wood at one time to build a speaker. And umpingo wood is kind of like one of the hardest wood on earth, and it's kind of like the dream material for speaker designers. If you talk to some speaker designers, they'll tell you like that's a dream material to use as a cabinet material. The problem is that umpingo wood is very expensive, hard to source because they're going extinct. So it's not also responsible to use wood like that. So, June was looking for an alternative that was less expensive, easier to source, and so on. And so he thought, let's try aluminum because it's very, very rigid. Now, here is where it's a little bit different. He didn't like the aluminum sound, much as like how I didn't like it. So he decided to try to mimic the umpingo's resonant sound by adding leather and different damping materials inside the cabinet, sandwiched into the cabinet. So inside the Platimon, actually you can find leather, melanin, I believe, and a bunch of other materials kind of married together to kind of create that umpingo sound. And that's one of the reasons that you don't hear as a aluminum cabinet kind of design. It has its own kind of cabinetry kind of sound that I kind of can't explain. It's a little bit hard. It's kind of in between wood and aluminum, but even that's not really accurate. It has its own kind of characteristic that I find to be mesmerizing and involving, especially when I listen to it more and more. I just get more into that sensation of that cabinetry design kind of taking effect into that music that I'm hearing, and it just sounds so musical to me. It sounds natural, it sounds sweet, sounds, again, a little bit bloomy like a wood cabinet, but it's so clean and it doesn't sound like it's coming from the speakers itself. It's just speakers itself disappear. But anyways, so basically I can't attest to the fact that, how this compares to actual umpingo wood because I haven't heard a umpingo version of the Platimons. But that's the gist of it. He basically used aluminum in combination with leather and other materials to mimic umpingo wood. So I thought that was super interesting, and it kind of matched up and answered some of my questions as to why aluminum and why I wasn't hearing a typical characteristic of an aluminum cabinetry. Another thing that I really loved about the Platimon speakers, and I was so glad that they used an AMT tweeter because I love AMT tweeters in general. I love the iyagi Vela series, and my criticism with that speaker was the upper mid-range was a little bit dry. But overall, I love the airy sensation of an AMT tweeter from iyagi Vela series, and even Atom Audio active loudspeakers. They have this kind of sensation of open top end that I just absolutely love. Has the sense of air that is, to me, more airy than a soft dome or a metal dome tweeter has ever given me. Now, soft dome tweeters and metal dome tweeters and other dome tweeters in the market can sound airy. I'm not saying that AMT tweeters are the only airy kind of presentation, but for me, AMT tweeters tend to give the most airy presentation. Now with the Platimon speakers, it was one of the most airiest and spacious kind of presentation I heard in the top end. So I thought, wow, that's impressive. Now cranking up the speakers, usually with speakers that exhibit that kind of airy behavior, tend to be a little bit shouty, a little bit aggressive when you crank up the music. At lower and medium volumes, no problem, but when you want to crank up the music once in a while, it can get a little bit bothersome. With the Platimons, I found that was not the case whatsoever. I found that it was easy to listen to, all the details were readily there, and most impressively, the distinction between the instruments, the layering, and again, the placement and the separation was so exact. Like the pianist was, back there. I could imagine and draw the piano itself, the grand piano itself, and the singer, to the right, in the center. It was just very distinctive. So I thought this was an amazing experience, and I was immediately drawn to the music and to the performance that I was hearing, even though it wasn't even my own room. Now, fast forward, I get the Platimon speakers in here, and I set them up, and I get immediately disappointed. And this is where the backstory kind of happens, right? I got immediately disappointed because I'm like, this is not what I heard in Korea. This is not what I liked about this speaker. something's going on. And then I just go back and forth, and then I realize that I have the left and the right channel opposite of each other. And I thought, okay, why should that matter? This is a passive loudspeaker. So the interesting thing is the Platimon speakers have a left and right channel distinction, and you can see that on the back of the loudspeakers. So I was like, okay, that is weird. What is causing that? So basically, the inner port and the outer port is tuned differently. Eventually, I understood that the placement was pretty vital. The left and right distinction was pretty vital to making the Platimon sound the way it does. And to me, that was, a revelation. I didn't think that a passive loudspeaker would have that much of a difference with left and right distinction. So that was an interesting finding with the speakers. Now, again, going forward, I just love the airiness of the presentation over the body of the sound. The mid bass was really nice. Again, the extension isn't quite as low. So, adding a subwoofer. So I have two Arendo subwoofers as well as, Rel subwoofers and so on that I can use if I want to fill in that low octave. But otherwise, I found that the speakers just disappear. The vocals are so sweet and detailed. I can hear every breath and all the nuances without any fatigue. The airiness, the presentation, the soundstage, the width and the depth. It was everything that I was looking for. But of course, with any speaker, it doesn't sound good with every gear. So I, over time, decided to use certain type of gear that I found to be quite exceptional with this loudspeaker. Now with the Platimon loudspeakers, I find that overall, if you pair it up with analytical sounding gear or gear that tilts towards a little bit on the analytical and accuracy side, then it can sound a little bit brittle and lean sounding and details for days, really fast attack and decay. And maybe that's your thing, but for me, that's not kind of the sound that I'm going for with my reference setup and for my own musical enjoyment. So I cater towards more of my preference, and so the Denafis Apollo amplifier was a perfect fit. Now I do alternate between the Denafis Apollo and the AGD reference monoblocks that I use, and also won the award last year along with the Platimons. But the reason the Denafis Apollo is a preferred match to the Platimons in general is because not only is it able to deliver heaps amounts of power and headroom, not that the Platimons really need it because it's a 91 dB sensitivity speaker, is more so for the extra headroom, but also for the overall general sound characteristic of this Apollo amplifier. The Apollo amplifier tends to have this almost darkish kind of sound, and married with warmer sounding speakers, it can be kind of detrimental, especially in the high frequency extension. I find that it can be too dull sounding. But with the Platimons, because the Platimons extend in its airy and in its own nature, I find that the marriage between the two is very, very good because the Apollo strength is the bass. It has really good textures in the mid-range, upper mid bass and extension. It's a very good bass monster of a amplifier. It's hard to find an amplifier that does bass control as well, aside from the much more expensive AGD monoblocks that I have raved about the bass before. So marry this together and you get this robust bass and texture and really good extension from the Platimons and airiness still intact. So I really love that combination. Now the preamplifier combination that I went with is a tube preamplifier, the ARG Audio tube preamplifier. This comes with a separate tube power supply, really overbuilt, and it sounds really amazing with this combination. Now, you don't have to go with this specific tube preamplifier. This just happens to be the one that I'm reviewing right now, so I won't spoil it too much, but it leans a little bit towards the warmer side as well. So like tube preamplifiers like A and K that I've used in the past, any tube preamplifier that leans a little bit on the warmer side is what I prefer to use with this combination specifically. And that's why the ARG Audio is perfect, because not only is it a warmish kind of sound. But at the same time, it gives the system a little bit more elastic kind of feeling in the strings and the vocals and instruments, making it sound a little bit more, to me, musical and more kind of, that stretched out feeling, that elastic feeling. So to me, that sounds musical. It comes back from that, gives me memory from that vintage days. Vintage in audio tend to have that kind of elastic sound. And so that is kind of what I looked for, and this preamplifier really gives that in spades. And of course the soundstage, a little bit of the added smoothness from the tube preamplifier really plays into role in the overall musicality of the system, and I would say it is a vital part to the system, a warm, nice tube preamplifier. As for the streamer, I am currently using the DMP A8 at times, especially because it has EQ functionality. So if I'm playing music at low levels at night, like it is right now, and I don't want to disturb my neighbors, then I can use the DSP function for the loudness contour so that I can have the elevated bass and treble so that I don't disturb my neighbors while having a nicely balanced sound at low levels. Because again, the side tracking, as you crank up the music or crank up the volume in general, our ears perceive it in more linear fashion. At lower volumes, then we kind of lose the extremes. So that's the whole loudness contour kind of, reason that's there. So anyways, so that's my streamer setup for just regular use, especially at night. But when I want to just keep the music flowing throughout the day and I'm just enjoying music and the entire day, I have the day off or whatever, I'm just testing different things, then I use the Arender N20, which is the second from the top from the Arender streamer lineup, along with the Audio Note DAC 5, which is again overboard of a system, but this is just mesmerizing of a sound, especially when I want to crank up the music. During the day, it's just a very, very mesmerizing sound. Again, that tube characteristic from the Audio Note are really filling up the room, holographic, soundstage depth. When I switch from the Ever Solo to this combination of the Arender and the DAC 5 from Audio Note, the first thing I notice is the soundstage just like everywhere. Like it's truly breathtaking. So every chance I get, I try to use that combination. But of course, at night when I play, I can't play with the Arender and the DAC 5 as it doesn't have a loudness contour, so it does a less good job at low volumes than the DMP A8 with the loudness contour at night. So that's why I have the two combinations. For the analog setup, I have the turntable from Harmony, Pure Fidelity turntable, right? And also the Audio Note phono stage. And I talk about the analog reference setup in the description below. I'll link the video to a video that talks about that more specifically. But this analog setup was catered more towards a more neutral balance with good detail retrieval. And I find that along with the tube preamplifier and the Apollo amplifier, compared to the streamer setup I have going on, sounds a little bit more warmer and richer with the analog setup. And it really depends which one I play, depends on what music I want to play, because yes, the sound differences are there, and sometimes that's the reason I switch one from the other. But most of the time, the reason I switch one from the other is not because of the sound differences, but mostly because of the music availability. A lot of people ask me which one sounds better, but for me, that becomes secondary, because for me, there's music pieces that I have on LP that is not on my streaming services, and vice versa. And also I have a CD player, like the Shenling CD player or whatever CD player I'm testing at the time. CD players change quite a bit. I haven't really set on a reference CD player yet, but basically I have CDs that I want to play that's not available on streaming, and vice versa on LP and so on. So depending on the music I want to play, if it's not available on streaming, then I'll go to turntable. And then if it's not on CD, then I'll go turntable. If it's on CD, I'll play CD. So it really depends. But in the form that if it's available on all three of them, then I usually just stream because it's convenient. So that's just you know, how I roll. But anyways, I hope this video was helpful. You know, it's not to say that you should get exactly what I have here, but more so kind of, I hope this video kind of helps you understand that if you like a certain characteristic of a speaker and you dislike some stuff about the speaker, like, you know, a little bit more of the analytical behavior of the Platimon, then you can mix and match the gear to cater the speaker's sound more to your liking. Now, it's not a band-aid. You're not going to fix a, you know, readily horrendously bright loudspeaker that sounds really, really bright to you to certainly sound warm and luscious. That's not happening with matching gear. But if you like the speakers in general, if you find the little nuances and stuff that the speakers are doing, and you really like certain things about the speaker that you really, you know, want to elevate, you can do that with gear matching. And that's kind of what I have done in this system. So I hope this video was helpful, and if it was, please click the like button. It does help my channel out greatly, and it doesn't cost you anything. And I'll have to see you guys on my next video. Until next time, make sure to subscribe.